It started, I suppose, when my eldest lad, who's now 20-something, as a little lad, we were going to school, and he said to me, because he knows I do funny things in healthcare, he said, how many diseases can modern medicine cure? I said, oh, that's a tricky one. I've got 5 minutes from now to the bus stop. Let's try it a different way. Let's try and figure out how many diseases it can't cure, because I think I can cope with that better. So we started to go through them ourselves. The common cold, because that's a difficult one. And you might as well throw in there most viral diseases, because the common cold is a virus, so yeah. Chronic degenerative diseases, that's a big word, but it means things which are chronic degenerative and go on and on. So by the nature of the word, it means we can't cure them. A lot of those. A lot of the cancers we can ameliorate, we can prolong people's life, but cure, it's a difficult one. There are many now which are still there and growing. There's back problems, that's my scene, you know. Not very good at that. Anyway, by the time we got to the bus stop, I was running out of possible things which modern medicine can cure. And this is when this concept of the modern medical emperor's new clothes came to light, which is another story. But where have we gone wrong? And I think, is medicine looks at all disease, it's pathology orientated. You've got to find what the pathology is, what the sickness is, and then when we know the sickness, we can apply the curative, the anti-disease thing, the antibiotic, the anti-inflammatory, the anti-whatever. So we fight the disease. I always liken this to fighting terrorism, but that's a political matter, this is I'm not sure whether one can fight terrorists. You know, Bush told us that we've got a war with terrorists now. I'm not sure. I think terrorism comes like infection from a healthy state of body, is that if we actually abuse ourselves, eat too much, drink too much, don't get any rest, don't get any exercise, areas of the body get pretty sick. And it actually opens up a milieu, an environment which certain types of bug love. So they bounce in there and they take root. And you have somebody with the common cold, you have somebody with flu, you have somebody with typhoid, you have somebody with measles or whatever. And there are a group of people, and these are mostly nature cure people, who actually believe in this totally. And they say, actually the body is quite intelligent. It's how we've survived all these millions of years, because there wasn't a GlaxoSmithKline or any other pharmaceutical company around 100,000 years ago, but we've actually survived. And so, give the body half a chance and it'll actually fix itself. But today we've been taught that you daren't do that. We really have to go immediately into treating it medically. Now, I have started to question this seriously. And you were telling me earlier of an instance when you walked away from medical care, you had a high fever, you felt very ill, but the following morning you start to feel better. And this is a classic with most little children. If you can get mums to help them through their feverish state and mop the brow and keep their head cool so they don't get deliriums and they don't hurt themselves, the fever starts and finishes and the child's healthy. All my kids came the same way, and they've got immune systems which are very powerful because they've been tested out, tried and used properly. The modern parent, very often, I don't think it's through laziness or fault of their own, it's their upbringing, their training, is that if the child gets a fever, they rush to the chemist and get an anti-fever medicine, which is Calpol or whatever, something which brings the temperature down. And now, the body is actually trying to deal with the situation by lots of changes, which are really probably one day we'll understand. At the moment we don't. And one of those changes is a high fever. So what do? As intelligent, is we actually pour stuff down the child's throat to stop the high fever. So they no longer have an acute incident where they're really poorly that night. They now have maybe chronic illness. So they're always a little bit poorly. Jimmy's never really got over that cold he had. No wonder he didn't go. He never given a chance to get over it properly. So you're moving now into the nature cure field. Now, here's another area of ignorance I have to admit, because as trained as an osteopath, I thought nature cure people were a bit sort of long-haired and sort of sandly and a bit iffy, like most medics think, or used to think of osteopaths. But the more I think about it, the more I read about it, they're actually well tuned in. And they say, look, if one of the great ones is Lingard, and he had a wonderful adage, which I think everybody can take away and use, eating. Now, generally speaking, we don't have much starvation in the West. No, pretty common, not very common. In the East, it is a big problem. Over here, no. Well, we have lots of diseases, all kinds. And Lingard said, 1/3 of what you eat does you good. 2/3 of what you eat is good for the doctors. And I think it's such a beautiful little concept, this. It fits with my breathing work, is don't breathe too much. But this fits on a similar sort of line. And their argument in Nature Cure is that whatever you stick in your mouth, in the way of food, you have to do something with it. The body's got to break it down, got to work on it, assemble it into something which you can use for its own. It doesn't need it. It's got two things now. It can either eliminate it, which takes a little bit of effort and work, and or it can actually store it. So there's a fat store or an energy store here, there. But it means there's an awful lot of extra work. So I sit down to my meal, and I'm as guilty as the next man because I'm a Westerner, and I have my plate of food, and there's a second portion, nice, and then come the pudding, and that was nice, but it'll make the extra be even nicer. So all the time now I'm thinking 1/3 does me good, 2/3 is good for the doctors, and I'm taking the extra portion, but I do know that that's maybe going to cause me problems. And if I really go over the top and overeat and overdrink, then I'll probably wake up in the middle of the night and be quite bilious, and I've sorted it out naturally that way. However, I won't. I will just survive. I'll put a little weight on. I will feel a little bit heavy and not feel so good for a little while until it's sort of the body's managed to cope with that overload. So it's pretty logical when you think about it, is that if you eat sufficient for your needs, the body takes what it needs, uses it, and you're okay. You take a little bit more than you need, it's now having to work on getting rid of that. And it means your elimination system's got to be working well, so there's a lot of people we know who maybe overeat and are constipated. Maybe there's a lot of people we know who are overeat and constipated but don't drink enough water, so they're dehydrated. And now you've got some really interesting medical problems arising, and you could run a whole book on these just from those simple factors. And the Nature Cure people, in their very simple way, said, look, eat less, exercise, live a fairly easy, calm life, and get plenty of fluid, and you'll probably be healthy. And that if from time to time something hits you, a disease, an infection, just go along with it, nurse it, look after yourself, take things easy until you come out the other side. You'll be even healthier then, because now you've got a stronger system than you had before. Now, you don't get a PhD for saying that. You can't do research in a university for saying that. You can't make money much out of saying that. So it's not very popular.
It's good. This theory you have that actually we invite germs into our body.
Ah, yeah, it's not mine. There was a bit of a battle on Pasteur and Béchamp, two French gentlemen. And Pasteur, we all remember now, the great man, there's statues of him for inventing the antibiotic, the germ theory, and demonstrating how it works, and the vaccination systems and so forth. And Béchamp was always very antagonistic. And he said, one of the examples he gave is you're walking by some fields and you see the cows in that field and they all look sickly and sort of haggard and drawn. And the next field, they're all healthy. Does it go through your mind, maybe it's the field they're in? No, one's a nice rich field, and the other one is a swampy ground where the grass is very poor. And this is a similar thing with the body, as if the body, the actual material in the body, is distressed and it's underfed or overfed, it's in a sickly state, then that will attract certain types of creatures into there, which will like that environment. If it's healthy, those creatures will not find a place to live. They will try, but they won't make it. Now, this is proved every day that we all go to London on the Underground, and I often think when I'm sitting in there, and it's very crowded and it's squashed, and there's people from all over the world breathing and sneezing. There's probably an awful lot of bugs in there. But the strange thing about it, most times when I go to London, I don't come back home with a tropical disease. I don't come back home with a new disease which I didn't have before I left. Because presumably my body was able to just not offer the right nutrient for that disease. If I was undernourished, if I was stressed in some way, if I had something else, then I might be susceptible to that disease and go down with it. You have people working on leper colonies. Who was the Schweitzer? I mean, what did he work all his life on leper colonies? I don't think he ever developed leprosy. And people working with AIDS patients. They don't all go down with AIDS. So it's this terrible fear, and I think this is coming back to it. We're now moving into a society which is fear-driven. We have to fear illness, we have to fear diseases, infections, and if we don't get vaccinated against 150 diseases, but by the age of 5 you'll probably die. Now, my kids weren't vaccinated against anything, I'm happy to say. They're all bouncing 20-odd-year-olds. That's another whole debate, which goes on and on. The great successes of vaccination, which are demonstrated, tended to coincide with cyclical processes. And if you looked at the disappearance of some of the killer diseases, though that trend was already going down at the introduction of the vaccination program. But if you select the right part of the graph, you can show how vaccination had a tremendous impact. And I've heard doctors who've spent a lifetime looking at this and the statistics. I mean, I listened for about 2 hours to one doctor. He'd started as a young doctor. He'd done all the right things. He'd vaccinated every baby who came his way. But he had noticed, a Dutch guy, he had noticed that quite a few of them, the mums were bringing the babies back feeling pretty poorly the following week or 2 days later. And he thought, well, this shouldn't be really happening. And then he started looking at the statistics and started to pull out the real data, which is not easy. And we had 2 hours of statistics and analysis. And this is why he's now going all around the world saying vaccination is not a good thing. I used to sit on the fence and say, well, vaccination is maybe not necessary if you're healthy, but if you're poorly, you might. But that doesn't work, because if you're a poorly child and a sickly child, you won't get vaccinated, which is anomalous in a way. So it's a huge debate, but it's part of the modern medical thinking, because we are fearful of disease, we're fearful of getting ill. Naturopaths, the nature cure people, say, no, the norm is health. And if we give ourselves half a chance, is we'll be healthy, and the health will actually deal with the sicknesses which come at us very easily. So, yeah, fearful of disease, fearful of aging, so you must have anti-aging devices, fearful of terrorists, so we have no new legislation, fearful of death, so we have better life insurance, and a whole ethos now. There's a very good guy who's written a book from Canterbury University. It calls it The Culture of Fear. And it's a brilliant thing, because in this one, he says he and his wife go into the park, and they've got little toddlers, and they sort of plonk the toddlers over there with the play stuff, and they go and sit on the bench over here. And he says the other parents look at them with horror, that they allow their little children to sort of play on their own, and not be there to protect them, and make sure they don't fall off, and make sure that nobody comes and takes them away. And it is this whole aspect of fear driving people in every direction, and it's very powerful. This is how politicians start wars. There's nasty people on the other side. They've got bad ideas, they could hurt us, so let's kill them all. And fear is very powerful, but it actually doesn't do as much good. And the antidote to fear is something which you never hear about, is courage.